This video is just going to be a short introduction to Shakespeare sonnets. We're opening the class by reading three of my favorite sonnets, three all-time masterpiece sonnets here. A sonnet is a poem with 14 lines. So that's the definition of a sonnet. And the Shakespearean sonnet follows a rhyme scheme. A, B, thought, sought, the rhyme. A, B, A, past, waste, off rhyme. But we're not going to go into the really technical aspects of the sonnet. We're reading mostly for style, content, and just to get our feet wet with some of the Shakespearean language. Now these poems are difficult, but what Shakespeare's trying to do is mimic the difficulties of life, right? Think of powerful art and think of life that is difficult. We're constantly struggling and thinking about different time. The fundamental act of a Shakespearean poem is to unfold itself in a developing dynamic of thought and feeling, marked by a unifying play of mind and language. There are a total of 154 sonnets. The first 126 are addressed to a fair friend, a male friend. The last 28 are addressed to a dark lady who is sexually experienced. Uh, think of the sonnets as consisting of four movements. So there are three quatrains. A quatrain is four lines. Quatrain, four lines. So let's think of that. There we have four. There we have four, and there we have four. So think of it as four movements. The first four lines introduce what's going on. The second four lines continue that. And think of these poems, these sonnets, as a working through. And the third quatrain furthers that working through. And the final couplet, we have a two-line couplet here, is supposed to tie it up in a certain way. So we have four distinct movements here. A few more notes about the first 126 sonnets addressed to the fair friend. The infatuation of the speaker with the young man is so entirely an infatuation of the eye, which makes a fetish of the beloved's countenance rather than of his entire body. That gazing is this infatuation's chief and perhaps best and only form of intercourse. It's concerned with looking, with thinking, with going back. Think of these sonnets as folding and unfolding. They play with time. They play with movement. There's a mix-up of time. Think of how we go through our days, right? We don't think linearly when we're driving or walking to class or doing anything else. All these distant memories pop up. All these distant things, right? A few more notes. Shakespearean sonnets are fundamentally structured by an evolving inner emotional dynamic. Think of how we're emotionally, psychologically, and philosophically always evolving. It's difficult, right? Things we thought before we don't think any longer. Our ideas, our views, our relationships, our emotions change. There's a constant struggle, a constant change in these sonnets, which makes them difficult and which requires reading over and over and over again. The speaker is seen to show more, change his mind, pass from description to analysis. The crucial rule in understanding the lyrics here, those sonnets, is that every significant change of linguistic pattern represents a motivated change in feeling in the speaker. And we'll closely look at those changes as we read these three sonnets. A few more notes. The sonnets stand as the record of a mind working out positions without the help of any pantheon or systematic doctrine. To the contrary, think of, and a few notes about the quatrains here. Think of this first quatrain, this first moment. The first quatrain of any given sonnet has a wide epistemological field, a wide field of knowledge. It's introducing a lot of themes. It's introducing a lot of topics in which to play. But in the second quatrain, the speaker generally queries or contradicts or subverts his first position. So there's this statement of the first position, and then there's this contradiction or going back on it sometimes. By the third quatrain, we have the third movement here. The speaker usually advances his subtlest or most comprehensive or most truthful position. So there's an opening, a going back, and another position. So you see these movements in the poem here. And that's an important way to read these poems. Even though we're looking at them, they're in this block. But if you think of them as these four separate entities, it really helps us close read the poem here. The couplet at the end is kind of, it doesn't give complete closure, but it's a tying up of what the speaker, what the thinker is doing. It kind of ties up the poem, and we'll look at these closely and get into that a little more. So those are just a few preliminary notes on the sonnets. Right? There's a great book, Helen Vendler's The Art of Shakespeare Sonnets, which I'm using a lot while looking at this. Think of Shakespeare's sonnets are philosophical insofar as they display interrelationships among their parts, which, as they unfold, trace a conflict in human cognitive and affective motions. So each sonnet is a conflict, which makes them difficult reading. We're in Elizabethan language here. This is a difficult language. So it just requires close reading and reading over and again. And on our Blackboard page, I have a bunch of notes here, a bunch of links. If you go to this on our Shakespeare Sonnets, here's a bunch of other links you can look at on Shakespeare Sonnets. I'm not going to close read this or look at these in detail. You can do that on your own. I want to try and make these videos short, but that's just an overview. All these sonnets require close reading and rereading. And the beginning of class, we're going to look at sonnet 30, 73, and 116.